One of the toughest things about doing these preview videos is the college football season just continues to fly by. Every single week seems to fly by, and that's part of the excitement, but it's also hard because all of a sudden it's week 8. But we're going to dive into it. We're going to make previews and predictions for the big games this week, and we'll start with early week action. Delaware at Jacksonville State. The Blue Hens have been off to a good start, but they have to find a way to stop Cam Cook this week. Cam Cook has been one of the best running backs in college football, and I'm curious to see what he's going to do after this year. It would be really interesting to see what his options will be because he's having a phenomenal season. Delaware is the surprise of Conference USA. They have been a really good football team, and they're trying to still make a run at the Conference USA championship game. Same with Jacksonville State. This one is going to be fun. Delaware is a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to go with the Gamecocks. Even though there's been a quarterback change, there's been plenty of success even with that, and stopping Cam Cook is going to be a tough one. But Delaware is definitely going to keep this one interesting for sure. Going into later in the week, we have Louisville at Miami. The Miami Hurricanes are having one of the better seasons in college football, and they're off to an incredible 5-0 start. They are a really fun team to watch, and the Cardinals are going to have their hands full trying to stop this offense and also protect their quarterback from Miami's defense. Now, Miller Moss has been relatively up and down. We've seen some good things from him. We've also seen him struggle. This is going to be his toughest test yet. How do you keep him comfortable? Part of that is going to be on the offensive line, but Miller Moss has to make quick decisions. He has to make smart decisions. You're not going to have a ton of time to just sit back and assess the situation. Miami has proven week in and week out that they are going to make life miserable for whoever they are facing. They are a high-flying group. They play with a ton of energy, and there's a reason why they're almost favored by 2 touchdowns. The Miami Hurricanes defense is going to swarm this Louisville offense, and you have to find ways to move the ball down the field. A lot of that pressure is going to be on Miller Moss. The rushing attack, I think, has died down in terms of the excitement a little bit, but it's going to be fun to see what Isaac Brown and Keelan Brown, after what we've seen them do, are really just going to be fun to see what the rushing attack can do. Isaac Brown has been explosive for this team, but this is a completely different challenge for this Louisville offense. To be able to move the ball down the field is going to require you to play at your best. And it'll be fun to see what Jeff Brom has in store for Corey Heatherman and this Miami defense. But Corey Heatherman is also a very good defensive mind, and he's going to have his guys playing at a high level. Miller Moss has to play his A game. You cannot turn the ball over, and you cannot miss on opportunities to move the chains and move the ball down the field. He's had good options, though. The guys that we talked about coming into the year, Chris Bell was one of them. 502 yards and 4 touchdowns. He has been a player that has stepped up in a big way, made some big-time plays. Colin Lacey, another guy that we thought, hey, this could be someone that plays a bigger role. You'd like to see a third option step up into the mix, but right now we don't really know who that's going to be consistently. Maybe it's tight end Jaleel Skinner. Dakari Collins at times has looked pretty good, but this is going to be a game in which you have to play at a high level. You have to play better than you've ever played before, because this Miami team is not going to feel sorry for you if you can't get it together, if you can't figure things out. And the offensive line for Louisville has a lot of pressure on them. To be able to handle this defensive line, one of the best, if not the best in college football, is going to be a challenge. The defense also has to find ways to stop this Miami offense. Shannon Dawson has done a great job of putting Miami in positions to make certain plays. And this is a Louisville defense that is going to have some trouble with the amount of talent that Miami has, specifically on the offensive line. I don't necessarily know how I feel that Louisville is going to match up, if you will, on this Miami offensive line. They just have so many good players. Now, there are some key players for this Louisville defensive line that could be interesting, but it's really the interior defensive line where Louisville might have some trouble. And stopping this rushing attack for Miami is going to be a key factor in how successful this Louisville Cardinals team can be. They have the talent to make things interesting, but Miami has shown so far this year that time and time again, they are so tough to defend and they are so tough to stop. And especially when things get going, it's going to be a big time challenge to be able to slow down this type of team. Now, when you go to the Miami side of things, Carson Beck has been a really nice piece for this offense. He's been a great fit in Shannon Dawson's system, and it's clear that he's still one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And he has done a great job of getting the ball to his playmakers. He's showing off his arm talent, and he's taking care of the football. Last year at Georgia, there were times where he had questions about his ability to keep the ball with his team and take care of the football. So far this year, he's done a good job of that. 1,200 yards of offense so far for him at passing, 11 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. He's had a good mix of rushing help and then his receivers getting up as well. But the rushing attack, I don't think gets enough recognition for Miami. There's a lot of love going to the wide receivers, and for good reason. But Mark Fletcher Jr. is having a pretty good year. 78 carries for 428 yards and 5 touchdowns. Sharmar Brown has been a really nice piece. I talked about him coming into the year, how I thought that he could be a big factor in this rushing attack. And for various different reasons, he has been exactly that. 57 carries for 225 yards and 4 touchdowns for him. So this rushing attack and this offensive line have done a good job of moving the ball, being very efficient with how they do things, and giving this offense balance. This is what makes this Miami team so dangerous, is the balance they have. They can run the football, they can throw the football. Getting Malachi Toney ready for this season was probably the best thing that this offense could have done. There were some questions about the go-to guys for this passing attack, especially when you lose the amount of talent at wide receiver that Miami had. Bringing in players from the transfer portal was going to be what you had to do, but you also had certain guys that needed to step up. Malachi Toney was one of them that they thought, hey, this guy could play a role. And so far, he has been one of their best options on offense. 29 catches for 375 yards and 3 touchdowns. He has been a big time playmaker. And as a freshman, that's saying something. This guy isn't the biggest player on the field, but he has the explosiveness. He has the quickness, the speed to get open and give Carson Beck options downfield or even in the short game. They have a guy who can make explosive plays happen as well. CJ Daniels has been a nice player for them as well. He has stepped up for this offense. 23 catches for 269 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's had a number of highlight reel catches as well. So you feel pretty good if you're Carson Beck. You know you have guys that you can hit. And we haven't even talked about Keelan Marion, Elijah Lofton, even other guys that haven't stepped up as much yet this year. There is still plenty of depth at this position to be able to make Miami even more dangerous than they were early in the season. And they've had some pretty good wins so far this year. So Louisville, like I said, has their hands full. Now the defense, we talked about them. This defensive line is nasty. Ruben Bain Jr. is one of the best, really one of the best players in college football, not just even on defense, one of the best players at any position in college football. He's been that good. He's been so explosive. Another guy that's kind of flying under the radar, though, because Ruben Bain is commanding so much of that attention, is Akeem Mesidor. I love how they've used both of these guys, whether they line up opposite of each other. They've also lined up side by side. Corey Heatherman is in his bag right now. And Shannon Dawson gets a lot of love for what the offense is doing, but Corey Heatherman deserves a lot of praise for what the defense has done so far this year as well. This is a group that flies around the field. They are a hard-hitting group. They play with a ton of energy. They play with a ton of intensity, tenacity. Any description you want to make of this team that's in the positive direction, you can probably make that. That's how good this group has been, and they're just as much a reason why they're 5-0 as the offense is. This has been a really good team, and for that reason, Miami is going to take care of business. If Louisville didn't show so many signs of struggle, especially against like Virginia, maybe this game would have a chance to be closer. But I think that Miami is going to take care of business, and it might get out of hand pretty quick if Louisville is not careful. The Nebraska Cornhuskers at the Minnesota Golden Gophers. These are two teams coming off wins in week 7, and they are looking to keep their momentum going. Nebraska comes into this game 5-1. Minnesota is 4-2. Nebraska is a 7.5-point favorite coming into this game on the road, and I think many Minnesota fans would probably question why that is the case, but when you look at how these two teams are playing, there's clearly one team that has a little bit more confidence than the other. That being said, don't count the Gophers out. This is still a very tough team to beat, and Nebraska isn't without their flaws either. Now, Dylan Raiola is kind of the epitome of that. We've seen a guy who's been able to make some good plays, and it's clear that Dana Holgorsen is the right offensive coordinator for him. That being said, last week was kind of the perfect example. You have a guy who threw 4 touchdown passes, but also threw 3 picks. There's clearly an inconsistent style of play so far this year that you'd like to see him sort out. And against good competition, Dylan Raiola has had his struggles. He's also had success, but he's had his struggles. So if you want him to take that next step, or if he's going to, if Nebraska is going to take that next step and be a playoff contender, you need your quarterback to play better. And he's played really well. Dylan Raiola has played really well, over almost 1,600 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. But it's those lapses, those stretches where he's just not as sharp as he should be, where that could really cost you in a game. Now, the Maryland game gave them plenty of trouble. That's a very good Maryland team. That's a lot better than I think people realize. But at the same time, that's not a game that Nebraska should have been caught up in. That's not a game where they should have been hanging on. You should really give Maryland a lot of credit, but at the same time, I think that Nebraska should have been much better. Now, I'd like to see this offense push the ball down the field a little bit more, not just throwing these short routes, these screen passes. It works if that's what gets the job done. But I'd like to see Dylan Raiola, who has all of the talent in the world, to be able to make some of those longer throws. Now, maybe it's the wide receivers aren't getting open, but if you really want to open up this offense, that's going to happen. That's going to have to happen. And it's going to give this offense another edge that teams probably aren't ready for, to be completely honest. I don't think teams are ready for if Nebraska can move the ball down the field with those intermediate to deep passes. I think that if Dylan Raiola can take that step, they're an absolute problem for anybody they face. Now, if you're going to go against this Minnesota offense with what you've been doing, or defense with what you've been doing, that's fine, but this is a defense that can make you pay. And maybe you have some hesitations about Dylan Raiola hitting guys deep because of certain things with his game. You also might have some reservations based off of the Minnesota defense that we'll talk about here in a little bit. Now, a name that should be familiar to Minnesota fans is Emmett Johnson, the former Holy Angels star who now starts for Nebraska, is off to a great start this year. 105 carries, 650 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's averaging 6.2 yards per carry. He's also caught 24 passes for 130 yards and 1 score. He's been explosive. He's been a nice, I would say, a nice emergence for this offense. His ability to balance out this offense has been a great thing for Dana Holgorsen, and something that we had a question about coming into this year. We weren't quite sure who is going to be that RB1, who is going to be the guy that takes the majority of the carries. And then at that point, is he going to be able to make enough explosive plays to move the ball down the field consistently and help this offense? Emmett Johnson has answered that question, and it's been a strong yes. Now, the wide receivers, we knew that this was a talented group. Now, we knew that this was going to be a fun group, but who was going to be that guy, or how much depth were they going to have? So far, the answer has been they have multiple guys that they can go to. Isaiah Hunter is someone they brought in via the transfer portal from Cal. 22 catches for 415 yards and 4 touchdowns. Ja'Cory Barney comes back for this year, 26 catches, 364 yards, 3 touchdowns. You brought in Dane Key from the transfer portal, 20 catches, 269 yards, 4 touchdowns. So you have 3 guys that have been proven commodities for this offense. I would just like to see them do it a little bit more. Hunter's an explosive player. Can you get him down the field more? Can you get him in positions to make explosive plays? That's going to be something to keep an eye on, because clearly the talent is there to be even more explosive than they've already been. And they're averaging 41 points a game. They're currently 11th in the country with that scoring. So it's not like they haven't had their successes. It's just that there are things that they could do better and even be even more explosive than what they already are. Now, the defense has kind of been a little bit of the opposite, if you will. I think that there have been times where this group has looked really good, but there have also been times where I think teams have had plenty of success against this group. That is going to be something that has to change this week, that has to be consistent this week. This is a Minnesota offense that isn't as explosive as some of the offenses they've already faced. And this defense, I think, has the ability to be a shutdown defense when they want to be. They've shown it at times. You look at what Cincinnati struggled with against this defense. You look at times what Maryland struggled with this defense. They have plenty of talent to be able to make teams really struggle and struggle to move the ball down the field and put up points. That's going to help your offense that's already shown that it can be explosive. But if the defense isn't doing its part, then what? That's going to be the big question for this team. If you're Minnesota, you're kind of just looking to play the role of spoiler. This is a group that is clearly, I want to call it a rebuild, if you will, but this is clearly not a group that is expecting to make some sort of run. They are looking to surprise a lot of people, and that's been kind of evident so far this year. Last week against Purdue, not a great performance by Minnesota. They do find a way to win that game, but it wasn't their greatest performance at all. Now, Drake Lindsey is kind of going through a little bit of a learning curve. He's trying to figure things out. He's trying to learn what is life like as a Big Ten quarterback. So far, he's looked fairly solid, though. And I say that you look at his numbers, just over 60% completion percentage, over 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Now, you're probably looking at those numbers and you're thinking, those are fairly pedestrian numbers. And that is very much true. But when you look at the history of Minnesota football at the quarterback position, typically when someone is struggling like this, those aren't their numbers. They're not even over 1,000 yards at this point. They're probably throwing 5 touchdowns to 4 interceptions or something similar to that. It is not nearly as productive as Drake Lindsey has been. Now, part of it is probably going to be the changes in offenses, the type of offense that they're running, but Drake Lindsey has shown at a young age that he is ready to be better than what a lot of quarterbacks have been for Minnesota. And so far, he has shown that at the early stages of a career, he's ahead of some of those other quarterbacks. So there are promising things with them. Now, the rushing attack has been inconsistent, which is kind of disappointing. It also kind of factors into why Drake Lindsey's been a little bit more productive. Darius Taylor, as long as he is healthy, I'm still convinced that he is one of the best running backs in college football. We just haven't seen him consistently healthy. The rushing attack, like I said, too, has not been super consistent, which has been a concern for this offense. The wide receivers have been kind of hit or miss at times, too. When you look at Le'Meke Brockington, he's leading the team right now, 23 catches for 253 yards and 2 touchdowns. Javon Tracy's tied his yardage, but done it on 16 catches with 2 touchdowns. Jalen Smith, he is going to be a really fun player to watch for this Minnesota team, assuming that they can keep him around. He is going to be really fun. He's averaging 21.2 yards per catch. This is an offense that has lots of potential, but it might be a little bit of time before we truly see that potential realized. You also have to keep those guys on the roster, especially with this transfer portal era. That might be difficult to do. But if Drake Lindsey sticks around, that makes it maybe a little bit more attractive to guys that are on the roster or even players that are considering coming to Minnesota because you have a young and promising quarterback. Now, the defense has been relatively good, I think. You think when you look at a coaching change, a coordinator change, you knew that that was going to provide some issues, but I think this group has played fairly solid. You've seen guys, the stars of this group, like Anthony Smith, step up at times. You've seen Corey Parrish doing a lot of things for this team. You've seen him as a defender. Last week, the pick 6 was obviously phenomenal. You've also seen him line up as a wide receiver. He has been doing a little bit of everything for this team, and that's been really fun. John Nestor's been kind of hit or miss. There are times where he looks really good. He leads the team with 3 interceptions, but there also have been times where you've seen him getting burned or he's getting a penalty called on him. So there are definitely things that he has to fix, but this is a secondary that's going to have their hands full, but they're ready for that challenge. They are prepared to not lock up, but really entertain this challenge that they have in front of them. Nebraska has really good wide receivers that can make you pay. And this is a secondary for Minnesota outside of Corey Parrish that is kind of underrated. They're definitely a group that's flying under the radar, and that's going to be a tough matchup for them to handle. Now, in terms of who wins this game, it really comes down to the success on offense that Minnesota has. Their defense is going to have their hands full with this Nebraska offense, but if their offense can't move the ball down the field, it doesn't matter what their defense does. I don't think that Nebraska should be a 7.5 point favorite, but I do think they're going to win this game. I think that they are going to be able to move the ball down the field enough and maybe score at a rate that Minnesota can't match. I do like what the Gophers could do, but it's clear right now that there's one team that's better than the other. Some other games that we'll get to in the morning slate for week 8. This one is the final Friday night game that we'll talk about. San Jose State at Utah State. Utah State is a 4.5 point favorite, and you're looking at a San Jose State team that has suddenly found its confidence. Walker Egat did not have the best start to the season. He has suddenly rediscovered his ability to move the ball down the field with his arm, and he's been phenomenal. Over 1,800 yards, 13 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. If you go look at his first few games, it was rough. So the fact that his numbers have improved to this says something. Danny Scudero is one of the best wide receivers in college football. It doesn't matter what level. He's that good. 845 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's averaging nearly 17 yards per catch. Utah State has their hands full. However, they have a secondary that's very interesting to watch and very talented. Noah Avenger has been really fun. 3 picks so far this year, as well as 44 tackles. They will have their hands full with this San Jose State passing attack, but they are a good group. Bryson Barnes, super underrated as a quarterback. I do think overall, San Jose State's playing better, but they have also shown that they still have flaws. I'm going with Utah State at home. I think that Bronco Mendenhall's team is a phenomenal team to watch if you have not done so already. LSU at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is a 2.5 point favorite. We haven't really talked about them since their previous loss against Alabama. They have a big opportunity here. LSU is not what they once were, so it's not as big of an opportunity, but it's still a big one for this Vanderbilt team. Diego Pavia knows what it takes to win in big games. And honestly, the Alabama score was a little bit deceiving compared to how the game actually went. Now, LSU's had its struggles as well. The offense has had its fair amount of struggles. Garrett Nussmeier has seen that firsthand. The rushing attack has not been good. So how do you get back on track against a Vanderbilt defense that's going to give you trouble? They're going to give you problems. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case. I don't know what the over-under is in this game, but taking the under probably feels like the smart move given how these two teams like to play. I'm going with Vanderbilt at home. I think they're going to get the job done. They're going to get the win, and LSU is going to have to figure out what is actually going on there. Georgia Tech at Duke. Duke is a 2.5 point favorite, and ever since I said that they're a team that you should be worried about in the ACC, all they've done is win. They have not stopped winning games in the they've lost. When they lost to Tulane, there was a feeling of maybe this is where this team could either crumble or they can step and rise to the occasion. There were things that Duke was doing that you're making those mental mistakes, you're getting penalties, you're just not doing the little things right. Ever since that Tulane game, they've looked like a completely different team, and they're a dangerous team. Darian Mensah has been very good. The passing attack has looked really fun. The defense is an absolute problem. And playing against a Georgia Tech team that's playing with some confidence as well, that's going to be a challenge. However, Georgia Tech has kind of been skating by lately. They've been just kind of holding on, and you can't do that against Duke. Duke is going to be a very tough team to beat, and Georgia Tech knows that. Haynes King is ready for that battle, though, and Haynes King is just one of the easiest players to root for based on how he plays. He loves the game of football. He goes to war for his teammates, and that's going to be fun. The problem is that if you don't play better than you have been recently, Duke is going to win this game. I am going to take the Duke Blue Devils at home. They're 2.5 point favorites. I think that they're just playing a lot better, and like I said, they are a problem if you are not careful. And right now, Georgia Tech hasn't exactly been a careful team. Washington at Michigan, another big time matchup for the Big Ten, and Michigan is a 5.5 point favorite. Bryce Underwood's playing with a lot of poise, a lot of composure. It's just that you haven't been able to see him kind of unleash what he could actually do. This is a young player that has been put in kind of a tougher situation with the lack of efficiency at wide receiver, the lack of protection up front. There have been things that have provided obstacles for him, and thankfully he has Justice Haynes in this rushing attack, but it's been kind of hard for him to show off his arm talent because of some of the things we've seen, and especially in those bigger games, that's been tough. Now, playing this one at home gives them a little bit more confidence. That being said, they're going against a Washington team that is extremely dangerous. Damon Williams, I think, is just hitting his stride, which could be terrifying for the teams that they face. Jonah Coleman has been solid. He's kind of cooled off a little bit from his hot start, but he's still a very good player. The defense is going to have to find ways to mess with Bryce Underwood to confuse him, and also find a way to stop Justice Haynes and basically dare Michigan to throw the ball downfield. This one, I'm going to take Washington. I think that they're playing really well right now. I think that they're going to be able to go in and move the ball down the field against this Michigan defense, and they're going to confuse Bryce Underwood a little bit more. If Bryce Underwood does take that step, though, and we see that on the field, then maybe I think otherwise. But right now, I'm going to lean with a team that's playing with a little bit more confidence in the Washington Huskies. Arizona at Houston. 2.5-point favorites are the Houston Cougars. That's going to be a fun game if you're into the Big 12 matchups. This is an underrated matchup. Noah Fifita is still playing really well. I like how he has played with a ton of confidence. And he's having his best year yet. Over 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Ismail Mahdi has been one of the best additions in the transfer portal for them. And they're going against a Houston team that isn't going to play at a blistering pace, but they are going to make things a little bit challenging where you have to be efficient. You have to take care of the football. And that offense isn't going to be the most explosive, but they've looked a lot better. I am going to go with Houston at home. That's going to be a fun environment for a Houston team that's playing with a lot more confidence. But these are two teams that are going to be tough to beat down the stretch, and this one is going to be super fun. Sticking within the Big 12, Baylor at TCU. TCU is a 2.5-point favorite, and they are just looking to get back on track. Last week was not a good performance against Kansas State overall, and nobody wants to be better more than Josh Hoover. Now, some of his mistakes were not really his fault, but there were a couple of passes, if you will, that you kind of put at him. You have the swing pass that he throws backwards that Kansas State brings back for a touchdown. You also have the tip pass, which was a little bit high to Kavorian Barnes, that gets picked as well. So there were things that could have been done. Eric McAllister is only capable of making plays over 20 plus yards. That is just what he does. 21 catches for 541 yards and 7 touchdowns. And against this Baylor defense, this could be a high-scoring game. TCU could have a lot of success against a Baylor defense that hasn't really stopped a ton of teams. Sawyer Robertson is one of the best quarterbacks in college football, and I think his name kind of has lost some of that fanfare because of the struggles of the team. If they're able to get back on track against TCU, then maybe that kind of changes. Right now, heading into this game, I think that I'm going with TCU. I think that they bounce back after a tough week against Kansas State. I do think this one is going to be relatively high scoring. So if you like points, this is the one for you. Oklahoma is looking to bounce back on the road against South Carolina. It's going to be tough to do that against Lenora Sellers and Dylan Stewart, but John Mateer has to show that he can make smarter decisions. If this Oklahoma team is going to make it to the playoff, if they are going to make a run, John Mateer has to make smarter decisions. It's clear that his hand is just fine, which is still incredible, but the problems between the ears, right? His decision making has not been great. His decision making has cost them at times, and it really cost them last week against Texas. South Carolina has a defense that could potentially do the same thing, and there's quite a few teams in the SEC right now that have that. Our offense is struggling, the defense looks pretty good. This is going to be an interesting matchup. I'm going with Oklahoma in this one because I trust their offense to do a little bit more consistently than South Carolina, but playing on the road is always going to be a challenge. Then we get into the afternoon slate, and we start with one that honestly could be Ohio State putting up 60 points against Wisconsin. And this, I don't know, at this point, we're kind of talking about when Luke Fickell is going to get fired rather than if, and Ohio State could be the one that actually seal his fate. Jeremiah Smith has been solid. Same with Carnell Tate. That's been a fun offense to watch. Caden Curry for the defense has been a phenomenal player for this defense. He's been really good, and you didn't really expect that coming into the year. You knew he could be good, but he's playing at a high level. Wisconsin's going to have their hands full for sure. Now, Vinny Anthony has kind of been one of the lone bright spots for this offense for Wisconsin, but you just don't have the firepower at home. Now, your only hope is maybe keeping it closer than people expected, maybe covering the spread, but this is Ohio State team is playing really well, and if they've done what they've done against the teams they've played, a team like Wisconsin doesn't really have a chance to surprise them at all. Michigan State heads to Indiana, who's coming off a big win over Oregon, and Michigan State's got to figure some things out. Jonathan Smith has some things to fix on this team, and his quarterback is one of them. And I don't necessarily know what the quarterback position is going to look like, but I do know they're going to be in for a long night against this Indiana defense. Indiana is going to win this game. That's not really a question, especially after what we saw last week. Fernando Mendoza looked really good. Even though he threw a pick six late in the game, you saw a guy who was composed, and his offensive talent helped him out as well. Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt are absolutely phenomenal, and it's going to be fun to see how they're able to play in a game after they just come off that big win. It feels like this team kind of takes everything as a business trip, and that to me is a big reason why they're going to take care of business, probably cover the spread too against this Michigan State team. Ole Miss at Georgia. We obviously know what happened last year, but Ole Miss is a team that, honestly, of all the undefeated teams, might be the most fraudulent of all of them. You look at what happened last week against Washington State. Maybe they were getting caught looking ahead to this game. Maybe they weren't. Who knows? But this is a team that has not been elite by any means. They have shown at times they can be explosive. Their defense has shown that it can shut teams down. But playing against Georgia on the road is going to be a completely different challenge. And Georgia is coming off kind of an ugly win as well, but they were going against an Auburn team that is much better than people realize. Now, Georgia has its own issues to figure out as well. Gunnar Stockton has not looked the most efficient. He has not been the most confident quarterback. How do you solve that is their biggest question. I'm going with Georgia here. I just don't really see how Ole Miss is going to be able to hang in this one. And honestly, like I said, this is a team that hasn't looked great, and they're going against a Georgia team that, while they do have their own issues, has not looked great either. A rematch in the ACC championship game from last year, the SMU Mustangs head to the Clemson Tigers. SMU is 4-2 on the season, and they're going against a Clemson team that's 3-3, which is not where anybody thought either of these two teams were going to be at this point in the season. They have had their struggles, they have had their frustrations, and now this is a big one. This is a big one, especially because if SMU wins this, they're going to 5-2. But if they lose, they're at 4-3 and probably having a lot of concerns about where they're headed. Same thing for Clemson. If Clemson wins this game, they're at 4-3, which isn't great, but at least you win a game against a solid team. You're also going to have to worry about what happens if you lose. What if you go to 3-4? That is going to be, this is already a team that's in turmoil, that's trying to figure things out. How do you fix that? That's going to be a big time question. For SMU, I don't think the problems have really been in the quarterback position. And I know that there were questions about Kevin Jennings, especially after the playoff loss to Penn State. But this is a guy who has already exceeded expectations one year, and he's doing it again. It's just that people aren't really watching because they're 4-2. Over 1,600 yards with 15 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. I talked about this coming into the year. I thought that Kevin Jennings was kind of flying under the radar, was once again underrated, and people were just overlooking him. Now, has he been one of the best quarterbacks in college football? No, but he has been a good quarterback that does not get the love he deserves. And this is a big opportunity to kind of silence some of those doubters, to show that, hey, I am going to be able to make these big time throws against this Clemson defense. And I'm going to show you that you need to pay attention to me. And this will be a great opportunity. His offense has also done things to help him out. TJ Harden has been a nice player for this offense. He has emerged as that go-to guy, that RB1. 85 carries for 415 yards, nearly 5 yards per carry, and 5 touchdowns. Chris Johnson Jr. has been really fun as well. 28 carries for 226 yards. You see the explosiveness with his 8.1 yards per carry and his 15.3 yards per catch. Rhett Lashley has figured out how to get him involved in the offense, and that's going to be a piece that Clemson has to worry about. That's another element of this offense that you have to defend, and so far, Kevin Jennings knows how to get him the football. That's been a really nice piece to have Kevin Jennings play pretty much the entire year last year and show that he's comfortable in this offense. He understands what the offense wants to do, and that helps him make smart decisions. Now, the wide receiver talent has helped him as well. Romello Brinson's been his go-to guy, 32 catches for 484 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jalen Cooper has been really nice as a freshman, 15 catches for 271 yards, 18.1 yards per catch, and 2 touchdowns. You have a number of other guys that have over 100 yards receiving, so you have plenty of talent that he can utilize. I'd love to see him get RJ Maryland a little bit more involved. I think that's a piece that could potentially cause some problems for this Clemson defense and give SMU a little bit more of an advantage that maybe you didn't have last year. That's going to be really fun to see how they do that. Now, SMU's offensive line is going to have their hands full against this Clemson defensive line, and how they do might dictate how successful this offense actually is. The defense for SMU has been, I think at times it's shown a lot of really exciting things. Now, has it been as elite as we expected it to? No, not necessarily, but they haven't been bad either. This is a group that is going to have a lot of fun in this one. Clemson's offense has been struggling. They haven't exactly been as elite as a lot of people anticipated, and that gives SMU opportunities to make plays. Turnovers have been something they've done really well over the last couple of years, and this year is the case once again. Their secondary is very good. The front group, you look at Cam Robertson and Isaiah Smith, those are 2 guys that have proven they can be disruptive, and that's going to be a big way to get Cade Klubnik off his game and get the ball back to your offense as well. An offense that's going to be able to put up points if you give them more and more opportunities. Now, Clemson is a 9.5 point favorite in this game. That should feel like disrespect if you're SMU. When you look at this game, this is not, especially with Clemson struggles, you should feel like SMU has a better chance than that to keep things close. That's going to be something to keep an eye on, and how motivated this SMU team is to, one, get revenge on what they had last year. They came up short in the ACC championship, and also how do you find ways to gain an advantage? How do you create those turnovers? How do you get Clemson maybe out of position in ways that you didn't necessarily do before? That's going to be something to look at. And how does Rhett Lashley get his team to play at that level? Now, if you're Clemson, everything still hinges on Cade Klubnik. You can say that, yeah, that's obvious, but that still holds true. Cade Klubnik dictates how successful this team is going to be based on how well he can run this offense. Now, you can make a statement that the rushing attack hasn't exactly helped him at times, but it's still on him to move the ball down the field efficiently. And yes, you've had injuries, but you also have guys that I think are figuring things out at the right time. Brian Wesco Jr. has kind of been that stable piece throughout the entire season. TJ Moore has kind of revived his slow start, and Antonio Williams is back healthy. How do you get that group involved more? Because you don't necessarily have to have a good rushing attack if those 3 are playing as well as they are. It's just that now Adam Randall appears to be a little bit more comfortable with his role. And honestly, this is a group that if they figure things out together, they could be dangerous in the ACC. They are going to be a really talented team. That's not a question. But how well can they play together? It all really starts with their quarterback, but clearly they've given him options to be able to move the ball down the field and be efficient. Now, how do you limit how disruptive SMU is? It all starts up front. This offensive line for Clemson can dictate or set the tone right off the bat. Being physical with this SMU team is going to be a big way to kind of keep them away from Cade Klubnik and really set the tone of the physicality that they're going to have to expect. Same thing on defense. How do you get Kevin Jennings rattled? Penn State did a great job of that in 2024 in the college football playoff. Clemson is probably just going to look, how do we replicate that success? It all starts up front. We talked about that. SMU has to find ways to negate this Clemson defensive line, and that's going to be a big question mark for this team until further notice, especially with the talent that you have to block. You have to block Will Helt and TJ Parker. You have to block a guy like Peter Woods. That's going to be challenging. I don't necessarily know if SMU has the ability to do that consistently, and that probably is going to dictate a lot about this game. If they're able to do that, Clemson is going to have a tough time slowing that offense down. But if you're going to be disruptive and you're going to be able to wreak havoc in this offense, then SMU's explosive plays are probably going away. Now, when it comes to picking this game, Clemson is playing better lately, and that's probably what I lean on to give Clemson the win, but I do think this one is closer than people expect. I think people are sleeping on SMU. I don't think that Clemson should be a 9.5-point favorite, but we're going to find out soon enough. We'll find out exactly who these two teams are when they play, and it'll be fun to see what the outcome tells us. One of the biggest group of 5 matchups in week 8 is UNLV at Boise State. Boise State is a 10.5-point favorite, and that's crazy because UNLV is 6-0. Boise State already has 2 losses. They're sitting at 4-2, which honestly we talked about how that could be a possibility. UNLV has been kind of playing with its food and is kind of lucky in a way to be 6-0. This is a big time matchup for the Rebels, and they have to show that they can be a better team than what we've seen so far. This is a team that has put up points, but they've also struggled to keep teams off the scoreboard. They're averaging 38.2 points per game on offense. The defense is nearly allowing 30 points per game. Doing that against Boise State is a quick way to lose this game in a heartbeat. So how do you do that? It's going to be on the defense, but let's start with the offense. Anthony Colandrea has been, I think, a really, really good player for this team. He's been the right fit for this offense and has performed pretty well for Dan Mullen. Over 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I think he's been really fun as a runner as well. 64 carries for 323 yards and 3 scores. Jaden Thomas has been pretty much the steady force for this offense, especially when things have not gone well consistently. 72 carries for 577 yards. He averages 8 yards per carry and 6 touchdowns. Now, the passing attack has kind of taken off a little bit as of recently. Jaden Bradley, 28 catches for 493 yards and 2 touchdowns. He has been a bright spot for this team and a consistent bright spot for this offense. That is something you have to hone in on. How are you able to move the ball against this defense? Because teams have moved the ball against Boise State. That has not been a question about if you can do that. It's a matter of how you do that. And so far, this UNLV team has shown that, hey, we can be explosive at times too, and we can move the ball down the field, but this is probably going to be the best defense they've faced this year. That presents a new challenge that you have not prepared for, and that's going to make things very interesting for this game because Boise State is ready to shut down that undefeated season for UNLV, and it's going to be interesting to see how UNLV recovers, especially if Boise State shuts down their first couple of drives. What are they going to do to bounce back? Do they have counters to whatever Boise State is running on defense? Now, for UNLV, how do you stop anybody? Right now, this is a group that has a lot of guys that can make plays, but how do you make more disruptive plays? When you look at their tackles for loss and sacks, you don't see a ton of consistent players. In fact, a lot of the guys that have tackles for loss are defensive backs. So you're using some of these guys in a little bit more of a capacity than you maybe wanted to. You also have, when you look at it, you have 4 of your top 5 tacklers are all in the defensive backfield. You don't necessarily want that if you want to have an elite defense. That being said, there are opportunities for them to be able to hang in this game and make things closer. You look at what they've been able to do. Amaris Brown, Marcel McDuffie combined for 6 interceptions so far this year. They have been, I think, bright spots in a defense that has lacked some at times. And if you're going to keep this game close with Boise State, turnovers are the quickest way to do that. You have an offense that can move the ball. You have an offense that can be explosive. But do you have the defense that can be opportunistic enough where it makes a difference in the game? That's going to be a big question. For Boise State, pretty much just taking care of the football is going to get the job done. I think this offense has enough to just move the ball consistently. And as long as Maddox Madsen isn't throwing a ton of picks, they should be just fine. Madsen has been all right this year, over 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Again, taking care of the football is going to be the biggest thing to keep UNLV at bay because this is a defense that can cause some problems for UNLV's offense. And this is an offense that as long as they don't beat themselves, they should be just fine. The rushing attack has been by committee, which is very different, obviously, than last year with Ashton Genty. Dylan Riley's been a nice emergence for this rushing attack. Sire Gaines and Malik Sherrod have done exactly what we expected them to do. They've combined for 10 total touchdowns. or 10 rushing touchdowns between the three of them, and it gives teams a lot of things to worry about. Now, Sherrod is a little bit more of that Swiss Army knife that's going to do a lot of things in the offense. He's also going to do things in the return game. So that's another element that could give Boise State the advantage. The passing attack, we've kind of seen some new faces step up. Chris Marshall has been explosive. 19 catches for 344 yards. That's 18.1 yards per catch and 1 touchdown. Ben Ford leads the team with 5 touchdown receptions. Latrell Capels has done exactly what we thought he would do. I'd like to see Matt Lauder involved in the offense a little bit more. I'd like to see him featured. Maybe this is the game to do that, especially against a defense that has shown that it can give up quite a bit of yardage and quite a few points. Now, their defense is going to have to find ways to create turnovers. And so far this year, they've been okay at that, but you'd like to see them do that a little bit more. You'd also like to see them continue to be disruptive. This is a group that can get to UNLV by being disruptive, by getting into the backfield. Their defensive line has done a good job of that. Jaden Virgin Morgan has been solid so far. Braxton Feely has been good as well, and that's going to help this secondary. You're going to have explosive players for UNLV. How do you limit the damage that they can do? How do you limit the explosive plays? Those are going to be big questions that have to be answered, and Boise State has the talent to do it. Being physical up front, continue playing with the energy you have on defense is going to be enough to give them the win. Boise State is going to win this game. I think that this has been a UNLV team that's just getting by, and now they're going to run into a team that can actually compete with them, and it can actually force them into tough situations and turn the ball over and also score points on them. Boise State, to me, wins this game and ends UNLV's undefeated season. Other games to keep an eye on, and honestly, the Old Dominion James Madison game would have been maybe a little bit more exciting if Old Dominion didn't absolutely get destroyed by Marshall last week. That was a tough loss if you're Old Dominion. You had playoff hopes going into that game, and honestly, while they're not gone, they're not going to be as likely as they were before that game started. Now, this is still a very dangerous team, and they can also do the same thing to James Madison. James Madison still very much has their playoff hopes alive. A guy like Colton Joseph has been solid, and if there's a guy that can ruin someone's playoff hopes, it's going to be him. That rushing attack has been super fun to watch, and he's been a big reason why. He's thrown for over 1,400 yards, 13 touchdowns. He also ran for 483 yards and 6 scores this year. The defense has been fairly solid as well, and that's going to be something that you want to keep an eye on against this James Madison offense, which hasn't been the most consistent, hasn't been the most explosive. So if James Madison is able to continue doing what it's doing, also to be disruptive like they've done against other teams, that's going to help. James Madison has been able to shut down offenses by living in the backfield. If they can do that against Old Dominion, they will be just fine. UTSA and North Texas, this is a game that was, I think, not a huge game in the American, but now it's not as huge for different reasons. UTSA was supposed to be, I think to a lot of people, better than North Texas. Now North Texas is off to a good start. Now they did kind of get shellacked by USF last week, but they're looking to bounce back. UTSA is looking to bounce back after a tough couple of weeks. Stopping this offense could be challenging, and this is a North Texas team that's looking to bounce back, and I think that they do that this week against the Roadrunners. Texas Tech at Arizona State. Heading into the season, this was supposed to be one of the biggest games in the Big 12. Arizona State made the playoff last year. Texas Tech obviously invested in his roster and wanted to be in a different spot. They are here. Arizona State just hasn't been the same. Last week against Utah, they got absolutely bulldozed by the Utes on the road, but also Sam Leavitt didn't play. Now, even when he's been in the roster or been in the lineup, he hasn't exactly been the most consistent player, and this offense hasn't been super balanced. Jordan Tyson has been the lone bright spot in the passing attack. That continues to be a problem. Now, I don't know if Sam Leavitt is going to play this week. That is going to be a question, something to keep an eye on. If he doesn't play, Texas Tech is going to cover this one by a long shot. If he does play, it gives them a better chance. It is a game on the road for Texas Tech. Now, it's not at night, which Arizona State is another one of those teams that at night, things are a little bit different. But Texas Tech is going to win this game. I don't have a ton of concerns about their ability to move the ball or get stops, especially if Sam Leavitt doesn't play. Mississippi State at Florida. Florida is a 9.5 point favorite, and Mississippi State continues to be in a way disrespected, and they have to find a way to win in the swamp. Now, Florida is playing a lot better in the last couple of weeks, so maybe they lean on that. This offense is much more difficult to stop, and Mississippi State has had troubles at times stopping good offenses. If DJ Legway continues playing with the confidence that he's played with the last 2 weeks, they should have no problem winning this game. Winning at home, I think Florida is going to get the job done. It still doesn't take away from what Mississippi State is doing, but it still is a tough game to win. Oregon at Rutgers. This is a cross-country trip for the Oregon Ducks, especially coming off that loss to Indiana. How do they play in this one? Can they bounce back? Can they get off to a hot start and basically put Rutgers away early? That's going to be a big question for Oregon in this one. I do think that they're going to have a little bit of trouble in terms of getting ready to play and getting off to a hot start, but I think that they're going to be able to take care of Rutgers. Even though this is a Rutgers team that's playing with a lot of confidence, Oregon is going to win this football game. Then we get into the night slate, Texas at Kentucky. Texas is a 10.5-point favorite coming off that Oklahoma win as a big win for them. Arch Manning playing with a little bit more confidence the last 2 weeks. Is that going to be enough to carry into the rest of the season? This is another opportunity for him to build that confidence against a Kentucky team that they should honestly have no problems beating. I'm taking Texas. That shouldn't be a surprise. I probably would take Texas with the points, but it all depends on how they start. Playing in Kentucky can be a bit of a challenge, so maybe they do get off to a slow start. Penn State at Iowa. Penn State just fired James Franklin. They're also going to be without Drew Aller for the rest of the season. All eyes are on Ethan Grunkmeyer. How does he perform? How does he play on the road? Playing at Iowa is going to be a problem. It's going to be a challenge. And Iowa's a 3.5-point favorite because of all those things we just said. I don't really know what Penn State's going to be. We're going to find out a lot about this team's character in this one. If they're able to win this one and keep things closer than maybe people expect, not even that. I think that Penn State is very much capable of winning this football game still. They are more talented than Iowa. They're still technically the better team, even though they're 3.5-point underdogs. But all things considered, you have to factor in some of the things that are going on. So I think that Iowa is going to present some challenges, and we've seen teams like Indiana struggle at Iowa. This is also a night game, and Penn State's seen that in the past, how much that can be a challenge. I'd probably go with Iowa in this one. I don't think it's going to be pretty for either side. I think it's going to be an ugly game, but Iowa is more comfortable with winning an ugly game right now than Penn State is. It's clear that against inferior competition, Penn State doesn't know what it's doing when things are close, especially late in the game. They don't know how to seal a game. They don't know how to pull away. And Iowa is ready to play that kind of a game. They are more equipped to do that. They're more prepared to do that. And they're going to have a home crowd behind them that's going to make things a lot more difficult. I'm going with the Iowa Hawkeyes. I think that they're just ready for that. They're ready to win that type of a game. Penn State is just reeling right now and has a lot of things to figure out. One of the teams that Penn State lost to was UCLA, and UCLA hosts Maryland this weekend. UCLA is a 3.5-point favorite. They beat Michigan State last week after beating Penn State the week before. Now they're looking to beat a Maryland team that is probably the best of those three teams, which is a weird thing to say. And Malik Washington is a big reason why. He's having tremendous success so far, but this is a young Maryland roster that has to go across the country and play a UCLA team playing with a ton of confidence. I'm going with UCLA in the 3.5 points. I think that they are just playing at a level that this is a hot run, and maybe it does end with a team like Maryland, but Maryland's coming off 2 consecutive losses. They're kind of reeling right now in a way. They got to find a way to bounce back. Maybe they do that against UCLA, but I'm going to go with the Bruins for now. Tennessee at Alabama. Alabama's a 9.5-point favorite, but this is a dangerous Tennessee team. I think they're better than that 9.5-point spread gives them credit for, but Alabama's playing with a ton of confidence. I still have no idea how they lost to Florida State, but here we are. Alabama is playing with a lot of explosiveness. Ty Simpson's playing on a whole different level than we've seen, especially after week 1. And he's playing really well. This passing attacks looks really good. The defense has also been stepping up in a big way. Does Tennessee have what it takes to pull off the upset? I don't necessarily know that right now. Joey Aguilar has to play his best football. This offense has to be able to move the ball down the field, and their defense has to find a way to slow down this passing attack. All eyes are going to be on Jermon McCoy. I don't know what his status is, but if he can play, if he can help this defense, then maybe they have a chance. But this passing attack for Alabama is no joke, and Tennessee has to be ready. I'm going with Alabama at home. They're just playing with too much confidence. And right now, I think that Tennessee is good, but there are levels to this game. And right now, Alabama looks like on a different level. USC at Notre Dame. And honestly, it's surprising to see that Notre Dame is an 8.5-point favorite. Now, they are at home, which has given USC some troubles so far this year, but USC is going to give Notre Dame plenty of things to worry about in this game. Jane Maeva has been really good for USC, completing nearly 72% of his passes, over 1,800 yards with 13 touchdowns. He has been so fun to watch for this team, and it helps when you have the talent around him that he does. Now, what is Waymon Jordan's status for this game? That is going to be a big question for USC. Now, you did have a guy like King Miller step up in a big way, and he was extremely explosive against Michigan. You're going to face another good defense in Notre Dame, so running the football is going to be paramount for you to be able to move the ball down the field. Jordan's been phenomenal. 88 carries for 576 yards, 5 touchdowns. King Miller now ups his total to 29 carries for 310 yards. That's 10.7 yards per carry. A little bit skewed because of last week, but still, 3 touchdowns. Eli Sanders has been a nice piece. I love how they use him in both the rushing attack and the passing attack. 47 carries for 264 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also has 8 catches for 126 yards. That's nearly 16 yards per catch and 1 score. So as if you didn't have enough to worry about with this USC offense, you add in that trio of running backs that have all shown that, hey, we can give you just as much trouble as the passing attack. That passing attack, obviously, Maeva has been a big part of that, but Mekhi Lemon has been the driving force behind that. 44 catches for 682 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, Jacoby Lane has been explosive at times, but we haven't seen him as consistently as Mekhi Lemon. 18 catches for 313 yards. He's averaging 17.4 yards per catch and 2 touchdowns. In his absence, we've seen tight end usage go up a little bit for USC. Lake McCree and Walker Lyons, those two have been really fun to watch. McCree is averaging 20.6 yards per catch on his 14 catches. Walker Lyons has 12 catches for 149 yards and 2 touchdowns. So as if you didn't have enough to worry about, again, this is going to be really fun. The biggest question for USC, how do you block Notre Dame's front? How do you keep them away from your quarterback? And we've seen how you can beat this Notre Dame defense. We've seen it so far this year. And if there's a team equipped to do some damage against this Notre Dame defense, it's USC. This is so much talent to defend, and not many teams have figured out ways to do that consistently. Notre Dame is going to have its hands full. However, this is a good Notre Dame defense that can be disruptive. So if you are USC, you got to figure out how they're going to block that group, how you're going to limit the disruptions in your offense, because you have so much explosive talent, and you did so against a good Michigan defense. Replicating that success against Notre Dame is going to be a great way to keep this game close and potentially pull off an upset on the road. Now, the defense also has to play its part. Turnovers are going to be a big thing. How do you get CJ Carr into tough situations? That's going to start up front. And this is a group that has been good at times, and it's been extremely disruptive at times as well. If you are able to get in CJ Carr's face, if you're able to hit him, get pressure on him, that's going to be a great way to put your defense, your secondary specifically, in successful positions. Bishop Fitzgerald already has 5 interceptions on the year. That number could go up a lot if this group continues doing what it's doing. So guys like Eric Gentry at linebacker can also play a part in that as well. You've also seen defensive ends play a big part, and this is a group that's pretty deep at that position. So if you're able to limit how much damage Notre Dame can do through the air, then you're feeling pretty good. And if you're able to limit what they do on the ground, you're in an even better position to potentially win this game. Notre Dame is a very good football team. Their 4-2 record maybe is a little bit deceiving, but they are a tough team to beat. And CJ Carr has been a big reason why. Over 1,600 yards passing, 13 touchdowns. He has been a bright spot on this offense, and he's been a nice development that we've seen as the games have progressed. He's very comfortable. That's the one thing you take away from him, is that even though he's young and new to this game, he is very comfortable in the positions that Notre Dame puts him. The spotlight is not too bright for him. You look at that Miami game, he showed that from an early point in the season, he was going to be comfortable with whatever they put on his plate, with whatever they asked him to do. And that was during a game where the rushing attack wasn't exactly helping out. Now, since then, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price have been a great tandem. Love has 100 carries for 530 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's also been a factor in the passing attack, 14 catches for 160 yards and 3 scores. Price has run the ball 63 times for 422 yards and 7 touchdowns. That is a dangerous duo. And if they're going to be able to do the same things against that USC defense, they're going to have a great chance to be able to move the ball down the field. Now, the passing attack has been very interesting because we haven't seen a ton of Jaden Greathouse this year. 4 catches for 73 yards. However, guys have stepped up in his place. Jordan Faison, 29 catches for 376 yards, 2 touchdowns. Eli Raridan at tight end, 20 catches, 342 yards. He's averaging 17.1 yards per catch. He has been a nice X factor for this Notre Dame offense. Malachi Fields, 18 catches, 339 yards. That's 18.8 yards per catch, 2 touchdowns. Will Pauling, 13 catches, 243 yards, 18.7 yards per catch, 3 touchdowns. So there's plenty of talent for CJ Carr to use, and plenty of talent to get the ball down the field. The offensive line has also done its job as well. So if you're looking at a group that's going to have an impact, it's going to be that offensive line. Keeping things relatively simple, getting back to what Notre Dame does very well, that's going to be a big way to get things in your favor. You're already 8.5-point favorites. It's time to play like that. The defense is really where you're going to find out if Notre Dame's going to be able to keep USC in check. The secondary has plenty of talent. That much has not gone away. However, there have been a couple of games where we've seen some weaknesses in that defense. We've seen teams take advantage of that secondary. We've seen teams throw the ball deep. This is a USC team that is not going to slow things down. They are going to speed things up, and they are going to attack that secondary. This is a big time opportunity for this Notre Dame team to potentially send a statement, send a message about, hey, you're not going to do that on us anymore. We're going to make sure that you're going to get shut down. And this defensive line can help as well. It's not a defensive line that a lot of people know, but guys like Boubacar Traore has been really good and very disruptive. That helps the secondary. Now, in terms of winning this game, I think this one is going to be closer than the 8.5 points. I think that if USC is able to move the ball down the field, they're going to be a problem. I'm actually going to pick USC to pull off the upset here, but Notre Dame has the formula to be able to shut that down. And I think that it's going to come down to how well Notre Dame can slow down this offense. And if they're able to be disruptive and get to Jane Maeva, then this pick is going to be incredibly wrong. But for now, I trust what this offense is doing for USC, and I think that they provide some issues that maybe Notre Dame's not ready for yet. Other games we'll jump into: Pitt at Syracuse. Pitt is a 10.5-point favorite and is playing really well with Mason Heinschel running the show. Eli Holstein got benched, and Heinschel has taken over the last 2 games and not looked back. They had a big win over Florida State last week, and they're looking to continue that success. Syracuse is kind of just looking to figure some things out. The quarterback position obviously has taken a massive hit since Steve Angeli went down, and that's going to be tough to bounce back from. I'm going with Pitt. Even though they're on the road, I'm going to go with Pitt. I do think Syracuse has some things to keep them a little bit closer than that 10.5 points, but Pitt is going to win that game. Missouri at Auburn. Both teams are coming off tough losses, and Missouri is looking to show that, hey, we're going to make a statement after a loss. Auburn is trying to still figure some things out. Jackson Arnold clearly has not been the right fit at quarterback, and the passing attack has taken massive hits. Now, how many of those guys you're going to lose if this continues remains to be seen, but there is plenty of talent to be able to utilize. Now, Auburn's defense is playing really well. The problem is that we've seen that with other teams. How long does that defense keep playing at that level before they decide, you know what, the offense doesn't do anything for us? Why are we even trying? That's going to be a problem. Missouri's playing with a ton of confidence. The tough loss against Alabama has them probably feeling like they could have potentially won that game, and they're going to play like that. Now, I'm going to go with Missouri on the road, but this Auburn defense could provide a lot of problems for this Missouri offense if they're not careful. Utah at BYU. The Holy War is going to be a phenomenal matchup. You have 5-1 Utah going against undefeated BYU. BYU has found ways to win, and Utah would be more than happy to end that undefeated season. And they're playing with a lot of confidence ever since they lost to Texas Tech. This is a team that is looking to build upon that and do so against a rival. Now, Devin Dampier has been a big reason for their recent success. He's been very good as a runner. You'd like to see him obviously take things to another level as a passer. That is going to dictate how successful they'll be the rest of the season, especially against really good competition. In this one, it's going to be a big factor because Devin Dampier's ability to provide balance to this offense really determines if this game is close or if Utah runs away with it, because there's a lot of people in college football right now that think that BYU is a little bit fraudulent, that their undefeated record does not really speak to the amount of dominance that they've been able to put out there. And there are questions about this BYU team, but they're still undefeated. You can't knock them for that. And Devin Dampier has the ability to kind of end that notion that they're able to continue winning games the way that they are. Devin Dampier is the biggest problem for BYU, and he has to show that he can be that. Over 1,100 yards so far this year, 11 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. He has a run for 378 yards and 5 touchdowns. Last week against Arizona State, an absolute stud in that game. Looked very good, and Arizona State didn't really have a ton of solutions for how to stop Devin Dampier. Now, helping him out, he's leading the team in rushing, but Wayshawn Parker and Nakari Rogers have been very good as well. Parker, 52 carries for 335 yards and 3 touchdowns. Rogers, 71 carries for 298 yards and 6 scores. The passing attack is where you maybe have questions about this team, though Ryan Davis has looked really good so far. 39 catches, 416 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tight end Dalen Bentley has been a guy that's emerged as a reliable target as well. 24 catches, 270 yards, 3 touchdowns. Outside of those two, not a ton of production from everybody else. That is where you have maybe the biggest concern for Utah. And a big way to negate that is getting Devin Dampier involved in the passing attack early. How do you get him comfortable? How do you get him to be more consistent as a passer? Because that's going to dictate their success, like I said before, and not just in games like this, but against teams like if you do face Texas Tech again. Now, this defense has been the classic Utah defense. We've seen them play at a level that we expect them to be at. And John Henry Daly, a name that BYU fans will be very familiar with, has been a big reason why. 30 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 8 sacks. Jackson Benny has been a great piece in the secondary. And last year, I think we had some concerns about who are the go-to guys, who are the disruptive players, the stars of this defense. This year, we have those answers. We know who the guys are, and we have a couple of veterans around them that have been really good as well. We haven't talked about Lander Barton hardly at all, and they've been using him both on offense and defense. His production hasn't been what it's been in the past, but they haven't needed him to. Guys like Daly have stepped up to a point where you don't really, you kind of almost forget that Landon Barton's on this team. Same with certain guys like Nate Ritchie, Tao Johnson, Smith Snowden, Logan Fano. Even you look at Jonathan Hall, who is the team's leading tackler, tied with Daly for the lead. You've kind of, in a way, forgotten that they exist because you have 2 stars that have stepped up. And that's great because Utah, it's just because you've forgotten about them doesn't mean the talent and the production have dipped. They are still very good, and that's something BYU is going to have to worry about. Now, for BYU, things were kind of rocky heading into the season. You weren't really sure what was going to happen, and you ended up turning over the offense to a freshman in Bear Bachmeier. And so far, I think you could say that he has exceeded expectations. 1,200 yards, of passing, 8 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. So for the most part, he has taken care of the football. He's also run 71 times for 295 yards and 7 touchdowns. So he's been a nice complement to LJ Martin in the backfield. Martin has continued where he left off from last year. 101 carries, 652 yards, 4 touchdowns. He is a physical player that is built for this matchup specifically. Now, he's going to do well, obviously, in other matchups, but if there's a guy that's built for the physicality of this game, it's LJ Martin, especially that Utah defense with how physical they're going to be. LJ Martin is the one piece that BYU has that can make a huge difference in setting the tone and setting a message. Now, the passing attack has to do its part as well. That's going to be a big question for BYU in this game. How do you move the ball down the field? Chase Roberts has proven to be the most consistent player on this offense, and he's had a little bit of help this year. Chase Roberts has 22 catches for 420 yards. That's 19.1 yards per catch and 3 touchdowns. Parker Kingston has stepped up in a massive way. We talked about his ability as a returner and what he needed to do to become more of a factor as a wide receiver, and he has done that. 23 catches, 333 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Carson Ryan has also been a nice piece at tight end. That's another guy to keep an eye on. But doing that against this Utah defense will be a question. And so far, BYU has surprised everyone. They have answered any questions about them, and that's why they're undefeated. The defense has also been a big part of that. This is a defense that I think coming into the year, you knew that they had some nice pieces. And so far, they have lived up to that reputation. They've lived up to expectations. They're averaging just under 15 points against per game. And this group has been really fun to watch. The linebackers, again, were the group that we talked about. And you knew what Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker were capable of. And so far, they have delivered. Jack Kelly, 21 catches, 21 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Isaiah Glasker, 26 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions. Siali Asura was going to be the guy that you had a question about because you knew he's coming back from an injury. You were wondering what he was going to be able to do. He's currently leading the team in tackles. So the linebacker position is just fine. The secondary, also just fine. Where we're really going to find out if this group is legit is the defensive line in this game. Utah's offensive line is as physical as you're going to see. This is so far a BYU defensive line that has played pretty well. This is a big opportunity for them to show that that's going to be the case throughout the rest of the season. If they're able to play at that level, if they're able to continue playing consistently, then you're feeling pretty good about what this defense can do against Utah. That being said, I'm going with Utah in this one. They're playing with a lot of confidence. Again, I have concerns about BYU, but it's also a rivalry game. This is going to be a close one for at least, it's going to be close probably for the entire game. But if Utah does pull away, it would be late. I do like the Utes to win. I think that they're just playing with a lot of confidence. They have the more talent, and they're probably playing a little bit looser than BYU. Final game of the Week 8 slate is going to be Florida State at Stanford. And while normally you probably wouldn't talk about this one a ton, Florida State has lost 3 consecutive games, and Mike Norvell has not done a good job of limiting the damage after a loss. Now, Stanford is not in the same realm as Florida State, but this is a cross-country trip for a Florida State team that has shown that against inferior competition, they don't exactly take things super serious. So is an upset on the way? Probably not, but definitely something to keep an eye on for the rest of Week 8. Something to keep an eye on late in that slate. Let me know what you think. What are your predictions for Week 8? Leave them in the comments below. Like the video, share the video. As always, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one.